Morgan Wallen's life story really begins in the hills of Sneedville, Tennessee, where he was born on May 13th, 1993. It's a quiet little town, the kind of place where Friday nights were for high school sports and Sundays were for church. His dad, Tommy, was a pastor, and his mom, Leslie, was a teacher, so his upbringing was rooted in faith, discipline, and community. From the time he was little, Morgan was surrounded by music. At church, he sang hymns and gospel songs alongside his sisters. At home, his dad played him classic rock, bands like Lynyrd Skynyrd and the Eagles, while his grandfather passed down bluegrass traditions. That mix of sounds gave Morgan a broad love for music before he even understood what genres were. But as a kid, his main focus wasn't music, it was baseball. He was talented, with dreams of going pro one day. In high school, he played shortstop and pitcher, earning attention for his skill. Everything seemed set for a sports career until his senior year, when a serious elbow injury suddenly ended his baseball ambitions. That was a turning point. Without baseball, Morgan turned his energy toward music. He'd already been playing piano and violin since childhood. His mom had signed him up for lessons, but now he picked up the guitar and began teaching himself chords. He also started writing songs, pouring his thoughts and experiences into lyrics. Music went from a hobby to a purpose. By his late teens, Morgan's voice had developed into something unique, smooth yet raspy, with a natural emotional pull. It was clear he had the raw talent to go further, but at that point, he was still just a small-town kid with a big dream. That dream would start taking shape a few years later when he stepped onto a national stage for the first time on The Voice. If you'd like, I can continue the story from The Voice onward, showing exactly how his childhood shaped the artist he became. That's where the turning point really takes off.
Morgan Wallen's life and career read like a mix of small-town dreams, big breaks, and a few sharp twists along the way. He was born on May 13, 1993, in Sneedville, Tennessee, a tiny town where everybody knew everybody. His dad was a pastor, his mom a teacher, and music was just part of everyday life. Morgan grew up hearing gospel at church, bluegrass from his grandparents, and classic rock from his dad's record collection. In high school, though, his heart was set on baseball. He was good enough to dream about playing professionally. But in his senior year, a serious elbow injury ended those hopes overnight. That moment could have been the end of his ambitions, but instead it pushed him toward a different path, music. He started focusing on piano, violin, guitar, and writing songs, slowly finding his own voice. His big break came in 2014 on The Voice. He didn't win, he was eliminated during the playoffs, but the exposure opened doors. Soon, he signed a record deal, released his first EP standalone, and in 2016 joined Big Loud Records. His first radio single, The Way I Talk, hinted at the mix of twang, grit, and modern edge that would make him stand out. By 2018, his debut album If I Know Me was climbing the charts with hits like Up Down, Whiskey Glasses, and Chassin' You. Then came the record-shattering Dangerous, the double album in 2021, which dominated Billboard for weeks. In 2023, One Thing at a Time went even further, 36 songs, all charting on the Billboard Hot 100, a feat no other artist had done before. His latest album, I'm the Problem, 2025, features collaborations with stars like Post Malone, Eric Church, and Hardy, showing just how far he's crossed into mainstream territory. Offstage, he's a dad to his son Indigo Wilder, born in 2020, and he runs the Morgan Wallen Foundation to support kids in sports and music. But his career hasn't been without controversy. He's faced public backlash for mistakes, including a widely publicized racial slur incident. Still, his fan base remains fiercely loyal, and his music continues to dominate streaming and radio. Today, Morgan Wallen is more than just a country singer. He's a crossover force blending country, rock, and even hip-hop influences, shaping the sound of modern country music while still holding onto his small-town roots. If you want, I can now expand this into a full YouTube-ready script about his life, with natural storytelling hooks and emotional beats that keep viewers watching. That way, it feels more like a personal journey than just a biography. Alright, here's Morgan Wallen's full life story starting from his childhood, told like a smooth, connected narrative, so it feels more like a journey than just a list of facts. Morgan Cole Wallen was born on May 13, 1993, in Sneedville, Tennessee, a tiny Appalachian town surrounded by rolling hills and country roads. His parents, Tommy and Leslie, raised him with strong family values. Tommy was a pastor, and Leslie was a teacher, which meant Morgan grew up in an environment centered on faith, education, and community. Music was always in the background of his childhood. On Sundays, the Wallen family sang gospel at church, and Morgan learned how to harmonize alongside his sisters. At home, his dad spun old records, classic rock from bands like LYNYRD, SKYNYRD, Fleetwood Mac, and the Eagles. Meanwhile, his grandfather passed down bluegrass traditions, and Morgan soaked it all in without realizing how much it was shaping him. But if you had asked young Morgan what he wanted to be when he grew up, he wouldn't have said country singer. His first love was baseball. By the time he was in high school, he was a standout pitcher and shortstop with a strong arm and real potential to play at the college level, and maybe even beyond. Music was more of a side interest at that time. He had taken piano and violin lessons as a kid because his mom thought it would give him discipline, but baseball was his dream. Then came the turning point. In his senior year of high school, Morgan suffered a severe elbow injury, serious enough to end any chance of pursuing baseball competitively. For a teenager, whose whole life had revolved around sports, it was devastating. But in that disappointment, a door quietly opened. With baseball gone, Morgan began leaning more into music. He picked up the guitar and taught himself to play. He started writing songs, at first just for himself, pouring his feelings into lyrics. Slowly, his natural singing voice began to stand out. It was smooth but carried a raspy edge, and it had the kind of emotion that made people stop and listen. In 2014, his life took another unexpected turn when he auditioned for The Voice Season 6. He began on Usher's team before being stolen by Adam Levine. Even though he didn't make it past the playoffs, the show gave him national exposure and introduced him to industry contacts. One of those connections led him to move to Nashville, where he began working with songwriters and producers who could help develop his sound. By 2015, Morgan released his first EP, Stand Alone, featuring the single Spin You Around. A year later, he signed with Big Loud Records and released The Way I Talk, a song that showed off his mix of small-town pride and modern country energy. His 2018 debut album, If I Know Me, turned him from newcomer to rising star. The record produced hits like Up Down, with Florida Georgia Line, Whiskey Glasses, and Chassin' You, all of which went on to be country radio staples. But it was his 2021 release, Dangerous, the double album, that sent him into superstar territory. The album debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and stayed there for 10 consecutive weeks, breaking streaming records for country music. Songs like Sand in My Boots and More Than My Hometown proved he could mix heartfelt storytelling with mass appeal. In 2023, Morgan pushed boundaries again, with One Thing at a Time, a massive 36-track album that blended country, rock, and even hip-hop influences. All 36 songs charted on the Billboard Hot 100, setting a record and proving his crossover power. His latest chapter came in 2025 with I'm the Problem, an album recorded partly at his farm near Nashville and featuring collaborations with Post Malone, Eric Church, Hardy,